Probation is usually given for a felony. A felony is a crime typically involving violence regarded as more serious than a misdemeanor, and not murder. But in this case, the judge gives the defendant probation for murder. In this edition of Probation for Murder, we revisit 3 cases in which individuals carelessly took the lives of innocent people through vehicular homicide. Most unfortunate for society is that all these defendants were all given probation for those murders. You know, I used to believe that it was the defendant that got off in these heinous cases based purely on their gender, but I have to re-examine this concept. I now believe that it is the judges and the prosecutors and lawyers who judge these individuals based on their gender, and they allow them to go free. A system that is based primarily on gender. It's not even about race anymore. You know, I wonder how hard these same prosecutors and judges would allow these women to go free if they were their loved ones that was killed in these accidents. Would they be so quick to defend them? Now I ask you, begin with our first case for probation. Would you allow this person to walk away scot-free? You see, on May 28th of this particular year, officers from the Minneapolis Police Department responded to the intersection of Broadway Avenue West and 26th Avenue North on the report of a pedestrian being struck by a vehicle. Now imagine this is your family member. Now upon arriving, police found Mr. Dodge for Gibraltar lying on the street. His injuries were consistent with being struck by a vehicle traveling at a high rate of speed. Now the case gets even deeper. Investigating officers found a silver Ford Taurus with an obvious and debilitating front end damage about 15 feet from Dodge's body. Witnesses told authorities at the scene that they saw 2 females run from the Taurus after it collided with the Dodge. And he is Dodge, not a vehicle. Now paramedics worked on Mr. Dodge at the scene and then transported him to the hospital where he died from his injuries. Now, they transported him, but the woman that hit him and her girlfriend took off. Now, the vehicle was discovered to be registered to Mrs. Dorr. Her phone was synchronized to her car at the time of the collision and automatically dialed 911 when the car detected the collision. Now, this self-calling feature is in a lot of modern-day phones, in that they self-dial the police in accidents. So if you don't want them to know that you just hit somebody, don't activate that feature. After her phone self-dialed the 911 operator, it opened the line of Dorr's phone and heard the 2 females talking outside the vehicle before the line went silent. In other words, once the women knew that the line was open to 911, they hung up immediately. Neither female made any attempt to speak to the 911 operator or to report the accident, nor did they try to render assistance to this man that had just been hit by a car. Not too long after the time of the collision, Dorr reported her car was stolen the night before after she left it accidentally unlocked. She also claimed that she left her phone and keys in her unlocked car. When officers requested that Dorr come to speak to them regarding her car, she failed to show up at multiple appointments made by the police. I wonder why. She knew she was lying, right? Later, Miss Dorr admitted to investigators that the car involved in the collision was hers and she was behind the wheel at the time of the incident. And additionally, she admitted to fleeing the scene. After reviewing surveillance footage, that they have at the corner, Big Brother, officers determined she was traveling at a high rate of speed, far above other cars traveling in the area at the time of the crash. This was you on the camera, this was you speeding. So once Mrs. Asada Dora entered a guilty plea to 1 count of criminal vehicular homicide, she was sentenced to 3 years of probation in lieu of 4 years in prison. So she could have got 4 years in prison, but he gave her probation. Moving right along to insanity, our second vehicle homicide story involves a driver who was sentenced to 2 years probation in a crash that killed an East High School student in Des Moines, Iowa. Wow, probation for murder. A one Mrs. Tara Flipping, just like when you're flipping a coin, struck 14-year-old Emma Cardenas with her car on April 28th of 2022. This year, she then drove away following a crash and was arrested that same day. So in each one of these cases, they flee the scene. Now, Flippin pleaded guilty to leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death and was sentenced to 2 years probation with a fine of $1,250. And because of this ruling, Anna Campos, Emma's mother, was livid. She said the judge made his decision. Even though I'm not happy about it, he went through the law. The laws on the books are no good. She continued on by saying, I vow to change the law. I don't want people to think that you could run over somebody and get away with probation. And no, we're not. Now, the maximum sentence for the charge is 5 years in prison in that state with a fine of $10,000. Now, mind you, 5 years in jail, $10,000 in fine. Now, the minimum sentence is probation and a $1,250 fine, which is what the judge gave her. In effect, that little girl's life had a value less than a wall-mounted television set. In court, the judge shared how deeply disappointing he was with the way Flippin handled a hit-and-run case, saying her actions are nothing to be proud of. I would imagine not. If you hit a little girl in a school zone, you take off. Now, Cardena's death has changed pedestrian safety on E University Avenue, where she was hit, just down the street from East High School, where she went to. In response to her passing, the Des Moines City Council voted in June to allow school speed zones to include areas where kids are frequently present, such as stadiums and practice fields. But there is no sign that would have stopped her from killing her in that school zone like that. Now, our third and final story involves a woman who received probation after killing a man on his moped. You're not safe in a school zone, you're not safe on the side of the road, you're not safe on a moped. Mrs. Stephanie Marie Wells, 22 years of age at the time of the accident, pleaded guilty in New Haven County Superior Court to felony death by motor vehicle and felony hit and run in the death of Michael James. Now, Mr. Rankin was 40 years old at the time and he was from Wilmington. Now, at the request of the prosecution, Judge John Noble sentenced Mill to 64 to 80 months in prison, but then turned around and suspended the prison sentence and put Wells on 60 months of unsupervised probation. Let's go into the accident. Now, according to the facts of the case, shortly before 3 a.m. July 19, 2014, Mrs. Wells was eastbound on Market Street near Forest Hills Drive when she struck Rankin as he stood in the right-hand travel lane next to his disabled moped. Now, a cab driver who spotted Rankin first was able to avoid Rankin by switching lanes, and he could see Wells approaching the moped in her Hyundai. So you're talking about a little small car. You would have seen the guy. Then the cab driver looked away just for a minute. He heard the impact, and when he looked back, he noticed that Wells was leaving the scene. She took off. She fled. The impact sent Rankin's body 113 feet from where he was struck. Rankin died at the scene, never made it to the hospital. When Wells drove past the cab driver, the driver followed her for at least 8 blocks before he stopped to report the wreck and license plate number to a police officer he spotted. By then, Wells had already escaped. She was gone. She was out of there. She wasn't going to stay around. But within an hour, Carricker said Wells called 911 to report she hit a moped rider. So when she got home, and she was safe, she thought she could protect herself, she did that. And when officers went to Wells' home, they found her to have a slurred speech and an odor of alcohol. She admitted drinking at a downtown bar prior to the accident. Now, Carricker said she had a blood draw determined Wells' blood alcohol content was about 0.13%. Now, the legal limit for driving is 0.08%. Now, Wells told police that the accident happened when she was looking down at her GPS. I don't know if you could even do that. When she looked up to see, she said the moped, but it was too late to stop and she hit it. Why did she stop? Now, in part, her testimonies would have assisted in her receiving probation for murder. But what do you think? Do you believe that any of these individuals should have received probation for the crime of murder? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you again, hopefully alive, next time.